to this virtual Wednesday at 2 program called An Artist of Ohio. I'm David Stark, Chief Curator, and I'm really happy to be joined by our Executive Director, Nannette Maciejunes. Just a few housekeeping items. You may have heard us talking beforehand about how if you have comments that you wish to share with other viewers, comments that Nannette and I won't necessarily see, if you want to chat amongst yourselves, if you have questions for our tech staff, then by all means enter them by clicking on the chat icon. And then you'll see another icon that says Q&A. Those would be questions and answers that you'd like Nannette and I to answer. And our plan is to talk for, the better part of an hour, maybe 45, 50 minutes. We might approach the hour mark, but we'll be sure to answer at least some questions that are posed to us at the end of the presentation. So with that said, I will ask our tech support to move to the next slide. And this will show what the focus of the presentation is all about. We have a gallery, Gallery 2, in the so-called historic building, which we informally called the Ross Wing, that was constructed in 1931, a gallery that is devoted to American art from the 19th century to approximately the 1950s, with one important exception that we'll talk about in a minute. The gallery is—
You can't miss. I mean,
yes, you absolutely cannot miss the glass piece in the center of the gallery, Sunflower by Christopher Reese. Yes, we should say it right off the start, right at the beginning. And you'll see on one of the walls the words American Stories. And that is the theme of the exhibition. Each of these works tells a story about America. And in thinking about these works, it occurred to me that so many of our American artworks are directly connected with Ohio. They were produced by artists from Ohio, that passed through Ohio, that had some connection with this state. So Nannette, kindly, I'm so excited that Nannette is joining me in a conversation on this art, because her field is American art, and particularly 19th century and early modern American art.
oh,
And,
not 19th century and nothing. I'm really an early modernist.
She's being very modest. She knows a lot about one of our still life artists that will.
Yeah, that is true. He is late 19th century. I forgot. Yeah.
So if we can go to the next slide. There are two very important Ohio, actually Columbus artists that are not at the current time represented in this gallery for various reasons, but we wanted to make sure to draw your attention to them. One is Amina Robinson, and she is the subject of a very large and important exhibition that's going to open in the Walter Wing, the new wing at the museum, on November 19th, Ragnan, the art of Amina Brenda-Lynn Robinson's House and Journals. And this is an exhibition connected with the house or the home of Amina Robinson that was left to the museum when she passed away a number of years ago. So there'll be a lot of new material that the public has never seen before, and a large catalog as well that will accompany the exhibition. So be sure not to miss that. And then Elijah Pierce, another Columbus artist who did carvings like the one that you see on the right in his barbershop that was located near the Columbus Museum. He is the subject of an exhibition that will open days from now, September 27th, in Philadelphia at the Barnes Foundation. And this exhibition, Elijah Pierce's America, draws heavily from the permanent collection of the Columbus Museum of Art. So you can learn a lot.
We're kind of thin on Elijah Pierce at home right now because we are the largest lender to the exhibition. We lent, I think, 30 carvings to the exhibition.
Indeed.
And Michael Hall, who is our adjunct curator of folk art, who is just retiring, Michael wrote a wonderful essay for the catalog.
So if you're not able to see the exhibition in Philadelphia, check out the website that will have different programs and presentations online of the exhibition. And as Nannette says, it is accompanied by a catalog with an essay by our own Michael Hall. Nannette, you also contributed to the catalog, did you not?
Nope, Michael did it on behalf of both of us.
I stand corrected, great.
Well, I was the one that was invited, and I thought Michael would write a better essay, so that's what we did.
very differential. So that's great. So can we see the next slide? Yes, and wanted to call your attention to the fact that a number of works that we're going to be talking about are covered in the Columbus Museum of Art publication that was just released last year, a catalog of the permanent collection of American art. It's titled Reflections, the American Collection of the Columbus Museum of Art. It has two different covers, but they're both the same book. And if you don't find it, if you don't have it already or haven't found it in your local library, you could order it online or come into the museum shop. And you'll, I think, be very pleased at the comprehensive nature of this catalog that covers art from the 19th century in our American collection up to contemporary. Next. And I think a good place to start in our survey of American art in this particular gallery is looking at three works that are on view by George Bellows, three works in Gallery 2. And two of them you see on a freestanding wall in the center of the gallery, opposite the sunflower. They're drawings that the artist did very early in his career. And Bellows is perhaps the best known, perhaps the greatest artist to come out of Columbus. He attended Ohio State, but did not finish. And these are works that he did during his final months at Ohio State that were, we think and have reason to believe, may have had something to do with a calendar, that they would have been perhaps illustrations for a calendar. And they represent—
probably sponsored by his fraternity, the Beta Theta Pi. So the Beta House. These were probably, we think the calendar might have been a fundraiser for, to sell the calendar to make money for the fraternity that he belonged to. And that's why they were found in the Beta House. But they do focus on OSU life, as David will tell us.
Right, and they were given, I'm glad you brought up the fraternity, because they're given to us by Ohio, or lent to us by Ohio State. They were discovered in the 1950s in the fraternity, and they were a number of years ago given to us by the Theta Delta chapter of the Beta Theta Pi Alumni Association.
Yeah, so the Betas had put them, when they found them in the 50s, I think like in a closet or something. And we still don't, it could be possibly that it was either in his last year at Ohio State or his first year in New York, and he sent them back as help. We don't know why they were left at the Beta House, but they were put on loan to, I think the faculty club for a really long time. And the Betas decided that the museum would keep a couple of them up all the time, that we could have them on loan. And they are spectacular. Look how big they are. They're big drawings. They're not small drawings. These are bigger drawings. But they're very, very early. He's just a kid when he does these.
Charlotte, can we have the next slide? Yeah, you can see enlargements. And yeah, as Nannette was saying, they're large. They show life both on and off campus. You see the little thumb. We have 7 altogether, and we're committed always to showing at least 2 of them at a time, if not more. And in the upper left-hand corner, the thumbnail, the small view you see of 2 students on the beach, that might be Cedar Point. So in some cases, there are views off campus, but the 2 vignettes that we have hanging now have to do with Ohio State football, which, as you can see through the years since 1904, yes, there have been some changes. Cheerleaders don't wear bloomers anymore, but some things haven't changed. For example, the octagonal O, that's the logo of Ohio State, dates back at least to this period, to 1903 to 4.
And it's interesting how we know about the fact that we think they were intended for a calendar. Another member of the museum found a sheet from not a whole calendar, but just an errant sheet that has one of these drawings, printed on a calendar page. So he found it in either an antique shop or a flea market or something. He bought it and he brought it to us. So that's kind of our thinking, is that they were part of some sort of calendar project that must have come to some kind of fruition. If any of you, keep your eyes out, if any of you ever see an entire calendar that looks like this, buy it immediately and give it to us. Shouldn't be very much. I mean, it's like a little inexpensive, you know. I sometimes watch eBay for it. There's certainly a surviving calendar somewhere, but it's fascinating. But you can always come and see 2 of them at the museum.
Right, we'll put them in different locations, but as Nannette said, there'll always something to see from this set. And so you can see different illustrations as time goes on. And
you probably all know what David and I are about to tell you, but there could be a few people of the 91 people on this that don't know the story of George Bellows, but he was born and raised in Columbus, Ohio. He is the only child of his parents' marriage. His father actually had been married before and his wife had died, and so Bellows had some siblings, half siblings, but he is the only, and his mother was 47 when he was born. So he was like the center of Anna Bellows' life. And his father, sometimes is described as an architect. He was a builder, he's not an architect. But his father had great professional ambitions, of course, for George, and they did not quite align with George's passion. George worked, you know, he went to Ohio State, he was on the yearbook staff, and he was also a very gifted amateur athlete. But he really wanted to be an artist. Ohio State at the time doesn't really have an art department. So he starts at Ohio State in 1901. He's there for 3 years. He is desperate to go and study art and to be in New York. So he conveniently forgets to take his 3rd year exams. Into your junior year, there was a set of exams you had to take to be able to proceed, you know, to move forward into senior year. He doesn't take those exams, he forgets. So his father finally allows him to go to New York. And though he has to live, like we're calling, he has to live in the YMCA for the first year or something. But really the turn of George Bellows' story is going to New York at that critical point, and he does begin to study art. But the key thing is that he meets Robert Henry, who was also an Ohioan, he's from Cincinnati. But Robert Henry was the great realist of his generation, and George Bellows becomes part of that circle that's also known as the Ashcan School. Ashcan is a early 20th century term for trash can. So they were just like the Impressionists. We call them the Impressionists. That was a name that was actually given to the Impressionists by a critic who said that doesn't look like painting, it looks like an impression of painting. Well, in the case of George Bellows and Robert Henry in that circle, the critic said these gritty urban scenes that they painted of New York weren't real serious painting. They looked like essentially trash can painting, but ash can painting. So Bellows, really his whole life then revolves in New York. He never lives here again, though he keeps his ties up. He comes back all the time to visit his mother, Anna. So David, tell us, this does not look to me like a gritty scene of New York. What is this? This is one of our masterpieces, but what is it?
Yeah, it's a polo match on the estate of a very wealthy individual, Jay Gould, who lived in New Jersey. And the title is Polo at Lakewood, but that is Lakewood in New Jersey, not Lakewood, Ohio. And it represents the range of the subjects of Bellows, that in some cases he painted the upper crust or high society. In other cases, he painted, as Nannette was saying, gritty, urban, working class, New York City scenes. You know, we have one of those snow dumpers that I talked about in my Wednesday at 2 remote presentation on July 29th that some of you may have heard. It's in Gallery 4.
David, before you leave this slide, I wanted them to look, I think you can see my arrow. David, can you see my arrow?
Not sure. Charlotte?
Well, look, everyone should look in the lower right-hand part of the painting.
There we go.
You can really see the really rapid brush strokes. Bellows was known to paint very quickly. He was very prolific. You know, he dies quite young. He dies of a burst appendix at the age of 43, but he was famous by the time he was 25. So his, he has this from 35, it's not even 20-year career. He created more than 700 paintings, 200 lithographs, and as many drawings as lithographs, because he worked very rapidly. And you can see this beautiful, this very rapid brushwork that, over in the right-hand corner is particularly evident, I think, in this picture, was his sort of signature style of painting. But worked very, very rapidly. He's very prolific. This is we have the largest public collection of Bellows's paintings is at Columbus. And we bought our first one in, actually, this is the first one we ever bought. We bought it in 1911. Mm-hmm. We bought it from George Bellows in 1911. We then, after George Bellows' death, we bought quite a number of paintings through the years from his widow, Emma. So we are still very close to the family. And in fact, a few years ago, we bought the artist record book from the grandchildren, and we own it jointly with the High Estate, which I think is a really important document of Bellows' work, because he would draw little pen and ink drawings of different pictures. So he'd put the title, when he painted it, all this, and then he'd draw a little pen and ink of it. So it's kind of fun.
Thanks. And another feature that connects this to the OSU drawings that we just saw is Bellows' love of sports. He was an avid athlete. He almost became a minor league baseball player in Cincinnati.
I think for 5 minutes, yeah.
And
of course, his most famous painting is Stag at Sharkey's, which I hate to tell you, we actually had a chance to buy, and I don't understand, but the museum passed on Stag at Sharkey's and bought another great Bellows, but we don't know Stag at Sharkey's, and Cleveland does. And that always makes me cranky, but we do have the most important public collection and one of the top 4 or 5 lithograph collections. Bellows is, you don't have any lithographs up right now, but lithographs are an incredibly important part of George Bellows' career and his work.
And yes, Stag at Sharkey's, as Nannette said, in the Cleveland Museum, which is a boxing scene, one of a number of his boxing
Staggy's was the name of the club or the bar where they boxed.
And we don't have the painting, the Cleveland Museum of Art. However, we do have prints of it. We have, I believe they're lithographs. Yeah, of Staggy.
We have all of the boxing lithographs. Doesn't make up for nothing. Doesn't make up.
But it helps.
Show us some more Bellows, David.
Yeah, so those are the only 3 Bellows, the 2 OSU scenes and a polo match that are in Gallery 2. However, if you walk down the corridor, leaving the gallery on the north side, and can we have the next pop in on this slide? Yes, so you leave the gallery and you continue down the corridor. Derby Court will be on your left. You'll see these 2 paintings that are also views of New York. And again, not the grittier, seamier side of New York, but more or less picturesque views. Blue snow. Nannette mentioned the relationship of the Ashcan School to Impressionism. And although you did see legitimately gray skies in the polo at Lakewood, the snow here, the color of the snow shadows is blue, which was the French Impressionist color used in showing shadows rather than gray and black. They preferred violets and blues so that they only painted in colors of the spectrum. That's not always true in Bellows' work, but in this particular snow scene, you do see blue shadows. And then Summer Night Riverside, a beautiful night scene.
And the best game to play with Riverside Drive is to try to figure out how many people are actually in the shadows of that painting. And the other thing about this, there are 2 paintings in the museum that are very difficult to photograph and reproduce. This is one of them because it goes dark on you. And the other one is the Edward Hopper, where the shadow on her shoulder turns into like something that looks like mold. But this is the other one that's really difficult to photograph because it has all of the wonderful movement in the shadows. And it's just these light gradations of blue and green. It's a beautiful picture. I am thinking this is the picture we bought instead of Stag at Sharkey's, but don't hold me to it. I think we went for beauty rather than the grit of Stag at Sharkey's. Okay, so now moving from Bellows, we have something not entirely different.
Yeah, another Ohio artist, not from Columbus, but he was born in Irwin, Ohio, grew up in Mechanicsburg, so rural Ohio, but he did attend briefly both Ohio State and what is now called CCAD, Columbus College of Art and Design. James R. Hopkins is the artist that we have represented in Gallery 2 with a painting on loan from Ohio State that I'll explain in a minute. But this artist, James Hopkins, directed the art department of Ohio State from 1923 to 47. That we had an exhibition that some of you may have seen in 2017, curated by Mark Polad, who teaches at DePaul in Chicago and wrote the catalog, which by the way is also available for sale in the museum store. And the Market Day is actually owned by the Ohio State Faculty Club that entered into an arrangement that Nannette facilitated. This is a brilliant move on Nannette's part, since we do not own paintings by Hopkins. We do have some works by his wife that I'll show in a minute, but there are he occupies an important place in the history of American art that's not always recognized. And I think if we move to the next slide, we can explain that. So he painted a series of about 20 works that are collectively called the Cumberland Suite, that were produced in Cumberland, the area of Cumberland Falls in Kentucky, southeastern Kentucky. And this suite was produced, and it includes all the works that you see on the screen and many more, when he was teaching at Cincinnati. And he began teaching at the Cincinnati Art Academy when World War I broke out in Europe. He had spent many years in Paris. He went back and forth between the US and Europe. And so he was, during the war years, pretty much restricted to travel within the US. And where he chose to go and produce these paintings is connected with a strain of European art in which, especially French painters, were fond of showing peasants in the rural parts of France that represented a society that was untouched by modern civilization, so that the emphasis was placed on the kind of the pure life and the natural values that they represented. And so he shows, in the case of the work that is on loan to us from the faculty club. And by the way, the arrangement is that they will rotate paintings. They have, I believe, 6 paintings by Hopkins, and they will give us a different painting each year. And so all of these paintings depict
on loan, though. They go back to them.
On loan, right, exactly.
They lend them to us.
Yes, thanks for clarifying. And these paintings that you see on the screen represent, as does Market Day in the Mountains, a handyman that took care of Hopkins and his wife while they were in Cumberland Falls. His name was Andy Vanover, and he occupied many roles. He was a traveling preacher, as you see in the work on the left. And by the way, these were among many works that were borrowed for the 2017 exhibition. The state of Kentucky, the Gateway Museum Center in Maysville lent us The Mountain Preacher. He was handy with an axe, as you can see in the painting at the Art Institute of Chicago, which was acquired, by the way, when it was first exhibited there in 1915. And in Market Day, he seems to be taking chickens to a market. Can I have the next image? Yeah, and so this area is still a tourist destination today. Cumberland Falls, sometimes it's called the Niagara of the South, a very prominent and large waterfall. And in Hopkins' day, it was pretty remote. He had to take a train from Cincinnati to as close as he could get in Kentucky, and then continue for 4 hours in a wagon ride, the wagon pulled by a mule, to finally reach Cumberland Falls. And he stayed at a hotel that looked similar to the one you see in the postcard on the right. It was called the Brunson Inn in Hopkins' day. And he didn't, however, paint the falls. He didn't paint the hotel except for minor views or portions that you see of it, for example, with Andy Vanover, who is resting on the hotel porch, we think, but rather he focused on the people that lived in this area.
So David, for James, this is only, he only does this body of work for just a handful of years, right? Because
3 years he went.
I mean, most of the time that he was, I mean, he's known for these images of beautiful women. He does all kinds of different things. But this has become the piece of his career that is part of art history. But David, so these are his, so like Gauguin painted, am I right, the Breton, it was Breton,
Yes,
the
indeed.
Breton peasants. So this is, James Earl Hopkins, this is his version of the Breton peasants, right? I mean,
Correct.
the American version of it. I mean,
Yeah.
that was his point of reference, as you said, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like what Gauguin was doing and what
Right.
Millet was doing, and
Absolutely. He was sometimes called, or at least one reviewer called him the Millet of the mountains. And Jules Breton was another late 19th century painter of peasants.
oh yeah, Jules Breton was, yeah.
And you see a kind of tension between modernism. There's a certain attention to the flatness of the picture surface and to pattern. In Market Day, in the upper left, for example, you see the vertical slats of the balcony fence, and you see the flat patterns of the leaves behind Andy. You see the stripes in his shirt. But on the other hand, it's very straightforwardly representational. You have,
Yeah, and you see it in the other picture too, because you see that almost that kind of light impressionistic landscape behind him sitting on the porch. Yeah,
exactly. And
but
his
it's so
wife,
interesting.
yeah, and it's right. And his wife's work was more modernist than Hopkins' work. She was a printmaker. I'll show you.
Show those. Those are interesting. I'm
The
trying to
next-
keep us on time. We're already at 2. Oh no, show this next. This is very cool.
Yeah, and then the importance to art history of Hopkins is the fact that he foreshadows a movement that will emerge about 4 or 5 years later, regionalism or American scene painting. Those two terms represent a movement between World War I and II in American art that overlap. And if you would compare, for example, Brother and Sister to American Gothic by Grant Wood, which is kind of the apex mountain of regionalism in American painting, you can certainly see the actually pretty specific similarities, but it's rare that you find references to Hopkins as having laid the foundation for or been a precursor to regionalism or American scene painting. So unfortunately, he's overlooked in that respect. And then just one final screen devoted to Hopkins. You may be familiar with Hopkins Hall on Ohio State. That was the art and art history building when Nannette and I were in grad school in the 70s at Ohio State. Now it's the engineering building, but it's on the Ohio State Oval, not far from the Wexner Art Center. And then I alluded to his wife, Edna Boyce Hopkins, also unfairly overlooked, but her flower, color woodblock prints showing flowers were more modernist in terms of their flatness.
And really, she's better known than he is still. I mean, the book that we helped, sort of midwife, Mark Pollad's book is really one of the first, I mean, it's one of the only contemporary studies of Hopkins. I mean, he hasn't been reviewed. I don't think you mentioned this, but eventually he goes to Ohio State. The reason they have a named building after him, when did he start teaching at Ohio State?
1923. He was recruited from Cincinnati.
And he pretty much teaches almost till he dies, right?
Well, not quite. He lives 2 decades beyond his retirement.
Okay,
47.
that's good.
But he died at 69. No, he lived a really long life. And he lived.
But he teaches more than 20 years, 25 years at the university.
Absolutely. Yeah, and he led the what had been a fledgling art department at Ohio State. That's why he was hired, to raise the stature of the art department, because he was a nationally prominent artist in his day, and he succeeded. And he lived to see the dedication in 1962 of Hopkins Hall.
Oh, that's cool.
That was, it was.
Yeah, we had done we actually did Edna. We did an exhibition of Edna's show, Edna's Hopkins work, maybe more than 10 years ago, maybe more like 12 to 15 years ago. So we did her first, and we came back to do him just a couple of years ago.
Indeed. So moving on to another Columbus artist, Racine Burkhardt. Nannette, do you want to say a few words?
Well, so Burkhardt, it's kind of interesting. So if we think about James Roy Hopkins being at the sort of the beginning of American scene painting. American scene painting emerges in the 20s and dominates, and it's also called regionalism, but I always call it American scene painting. Dominates the 1930s. It's a style of very, very realistic art. The idea is to paint, it's also, it's kind of the Paint America movement. The idea of painting the sort of this rich landscape of America and the people of America. So it was very non-New York centric. There is a New York form of American scene painting, but you think of it as being across the country. So Burkhardt, the reason that's interesting is Burkhardt really comes of age as a painter during the American scene movement. So he thinks that's what he's going to paint. He's going to make these realistic scenes of, of Columbus, which is where he was living. So you see the book on, the cover of the book on the upper left-hand corner is actually a self-portrait of Emerson Burkhardt. I have a great story about that I will not tell because it takes too long, but it is just by the grace of the universe that painting lives in Columbus, Ohio, because it doesn't. Nannette was of little use to this collector. I learned a big lesson. I was a younger curator. I learned a big lesson. But anyway, then we have that beautiful painting. But he's known on the upper right-hand corner of your screen, where he's known for these wonderful scenes of Columbus, particularly the East Side. The African-American neighborhoods of the East Side. He was very interested. This is Mound Street that we own. There's a really famous one called the Blue Goose, which I think was a kind of a restaurant bar. Wonderful pictures. And they are what he does throughout the 40s. Our great masterpiece by Burkhardt that is up in the galleries is up most of the time. I get credit for this one. I did the right thing on this one as I didn't do the right thing on the other one. This is a portrait of another painter that lived in Columbus, Ohio, named Roman Johnson. I never knew Emerson Burkhardt. Emerson died in '69. I was certainly on the planet. I just wasn't part of the Columbus art scene, but 1969. So I never knew him, but Roman Johnson, the man who is the model in this portrait, I knew quite well. And this is an incredibly important art friendship in Columbus, Ohio. Roman Johnson, one of his major mentors and teachers is Emerson Burkhardt, and he always credited Emerson with that. He tells a great story that he came home from work one day and his neighbor said, you need to go out there and talk to that man. There's a white man out there on Mount Vernon Avenue painting. Go out there and talk to him. And Roman, of course, this is his first encounter with Emerson Burkhardt. He used to tell that story again and again. This is a very large portrait. If you've ever been in the galleries, you'll see it's in a very big, heavy frame. It's an old frame. Emerson used to frame everything in these old, beat up frames, and if they weren't beat up enough, he would beat them with a chain to make them look worse, so that they are these sort of gnarly, like they look old, beat up frames. Roman said that he posed for this picture more than 60 sittings, and we also, the other thing that Emerson would do, he would put a paint slash on the back of the canvas for every painting session. And he did this on all of his pictures. You actually can barely see it in the picture at the left, the back, but if you actually see the self-portrait, you see the marks. But Roman said 60 times he was seated, that were sittings for this picture. Roman used to talk to me about how Emerson wanted to really be able to paint the veins on Roman's arm, and so he would ask Roman to do this a million times, so his veins would pop out on his hand. Roman was always very proud that his wedding ring is visible in this picture. But the painting was originally, for Roman Johnson, this painting, for Emerson Burkhardt, this painting represented a young man coming of age. And he originally called it the confused process of becoming. And Emerson later, and for Roman, he said he always saw it as him coming of age as a painter. him, becoming a painter. Eventually, Emerson, who was deeply, I think Emerson is a person who, way before many of us understood systemic racism, Emerson Burkhardt did understand systemic racism. And he said for him, eventually the painting becomes an image of the journey of African Americans in mid-century America. And he renames the painting Man is Man. And we got it, it was first exhibited at the Columbus Museum of Art the year it was painted in 1946. After that, Emerson began to give it, submit it to all these major exhibitions, and it was rejected again and again and again, because by 1946, the American scene is being washed away by the emergence of abstract expressionism. And it just destroys Emerson Burkhardt's career. He spends the latter part of his career on interesting, he was hired by a man named Carl Jaeger. Somebody on this call may remember the Jaegers, but Carl, who owned this painting and sold it to the museum. But Carl had a ship, was called and on the ship was called the International School of, the International School, I think just the International School. And Emerson was their resident artist. And there are all these pictures in Columbus of late Emerson Burkhardt's of like Hong Kong's port and all these different scenes from around the world. But it was after this great moment in the 40s where he was an extraordinary American scene painter. But this is just a fantastic painting. I talked too long, I'm sorry, David.
Oh, Nannette, just one quick comment. Can we back up just 1 second? So the self-portrait is actually taken from the cover of a monograph of a biography.
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, yes, save it.
By Michael Hall, which is also available. Sorry, this sounds like a shameless commercial plug throughout the talk, but you can purchase it in our museum store, or perhaps find it in your local library. And I've also put in boldface, when you see the title, artist and title, the caption in boldface, that means that the work you're seeing is in gallery 2. If it's in plain type, it's either elsewhere in the museum, or in the case of this Mound Street, it's in storage. All right, just wanted to make that clear. Now, next word.
Now, David, we have only, so I thought, how about we don't do Clarence Carter? Let's do SS David and then jump to Christopher Reese.
Sounds like a plan.
So go back for 1 minute, Charlotte. We're going to talk about this object on the left, and you see it's in a case. It's a painted, painted object. It's something called trompe-l'oeil. Trompe-l'oeil in French, the translation means to deceive the eye. And it is a major part of late 19th century American still life painting. We have always been interested, so Charlotte, the next slide. We've always been interested because we own the painting in the middle of this slide, William Harnett, After the Hunt. I can't remember now whether William Harnett did 4 or 5 versions of this painting, but it is one of the, he was the master American trompe-l'oeil painter of the late 19th century. Because we own that painting, we've always been into trompe-l'oeil. So we bought the painting on the right, which is by Otis Kay, which is another great, we haven't owned that very long. Neither of them are from Ohio. But the man who painted the cat might be from Ohio. What's the next slide, Charlotte? I can't remember. Go one more ahead and then we'll come back to this. No, go back again. Go back to that box. So the idea of a trompe-l'oeil object is really an old idea. If you came to the Rembrandt show that we did with Dordrecht, you may have remembered seeing a wonderful little wooden object of painted books that was meant to sit on a shelf or on a desk and look like it was a stack of books. Actually, it's a painted object that you propped there, a little stand and propped up. So this idea of making these illusionistic objects is a really old idea. So that object from the Rembrandt show is 17th century. But David here has included the Andy Warhol Brillo box, which again is a trompe-l'oeil box. I mean, it's a hand-painted box by Andy Warhol, creation by Andy Warhol, to look like
cardboard. Yeah,
cardboard.
It's hand stenciled.
Hand stenciled, it wouldn't, but it's meant to deceive you, to trick you into thinking you're looking at a Brillo box. It's got other meanings too. For Andy Warhol, there are layers of meanings. But in terms of our comparison, so this box over on the left, which is our SS David, is literally a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-sided canvas box. It has a back. The back is open. That is meant, it's all painted, but it's meant to look like a cat sitting in a box, in a little crate. So now go to the next slide. Now let's see, what do we know about this character? So the reason the Columbus Museum of Art gets involved in this story is partially because of the Harnett. But also a collector in Columbus owned the New Variety Try One. This again is a canvas. This is canvas. This is not wood. It's painted to look like wood. And then it's painted to look like a wood, you know, a piece of wood that's been hollowed out, that there's been a, you know, space hollowed out to put these almonds in. And then this broken glass has been tacked, a piece of glass that's later broken has been tacked across it. This was given to us years and years and years ago. And one of my very first projects ever was to figure out about this artist. And you can see the Art Institute of Chicago owns the one on the right now. And you see that the Art Institute of Chicago calls theirs D. Scott Evans. In 1971, 2 art historians came up with a theory. They couldn't find SS David, and they kept finding these little still life trompe-l'oeil paintings. So they decided that this Cleveland artist, he was actually, D. Scott Evans is a man named David Scott Evans. He was a painter born in Boston, Indiana, which is right on the border with Ohio. But he then trained in Cincinnati and spent a huge chunk of his career in Cleveland. He helped found the Cleveland Institute of Art, you know, for studies. He was a founder and an instructor there. He finally leaves Cleveland to go to New York in 1887. But he spent a big chunk of his life in New York, in Cleveland. So they had this theory that SS David is a pseudonym for D. Scott Evans, and that D. Scott Evans, who painted beautiful genre pictures of young women in frilly dresses and, you know, very typical of the late 19th century, very forgettable. But that he was actually the same creator of these paintings. And the reason for that is there's 3 trompe-l'oeil paintings that actually, from this series of almonds and peanuts and hanging fruit and hanging potatoes, there are 3 of them that have D. Scott Evans' name on them. So they then hypothesized that he painted all of them. When they made that hypothesis in 1971, there was only a handful of these paintings known. We now know there are dozens and dozens and dozens of these paintings, these trompe-l'oeil paintings of fruit and nuts and all kinds of things, and potatoes. And they have varying signatures. We now know there are, some of them are signed SS David, some of them are signed Stanley S. David, some of them are signed Scott David. I contend that D. Scott Evans only painted the ones that have his own name on them. That he was very much his mainstream paintings look like William Merritt Chase. They always look like somebody else. The works always look like, you're like, oh, that's him being this guy. So I have a feeling that D. Scott Evans met SS David in New York, or saw this body of work, and he created a few of them himself and signed his own name. We still don't know who Stanley S. or SS David is. We're searching. We have a young scholar working on that. But this box is so incredible. So we own again, the Art Institute owns the potatoes. We own the little almond picture, and we own this box. These trompe-l'oeil objects tend not to survive. I think people didn't take them seriously. They took the painting seriously, though often the paintings were hung in bars and restaurants and all kinds of places. The Harnetts were hung in bars, I know. But I think people didn't take the objects seriously as art objects, maybe. Most of them have been destroyed. There are only a handful surviving from the 17th century. I know that was exciting to bring the one from Dordrecht. There are very few from the 19th century. There are 2 versions of the cat. One is unsigned, and this one is signed SS David. There are multiple, they're like multiples of the different compositions. There are multiple almond pictures, multiple peanut pictures, multiple cats. So it's a mystery that is unsolved, but that box is just to die for. Though I wish I'd bought it years and years ago because it was cheaper. It was not so cheap when we bought it now.
And then a quick look at more still lifes in Gallery 2. Carduceus Plantagenet Ream, an Ohio landscape painter born near Lancaster.
Still life.
Excuse me?
You said landscape, still life.
Oh, sorry about that. Gee, still lifes that are not trompe l'oeil paintings. It's pretty clear when the viewer looks at these that they're paintings framed on canvases. We're not given the illusion that you could actually reach out and touch these objects as skillfully and realistically as they are painted. But this artist lived in different places in the US, Cleveland, New York. He moved to Chicago at one point. He married a German woman in 1882, spent 3 months out of the year in Germany beginning in the 1880s. His style is similar to that of other Ohio still life painters, such as Silas Martin, Edmund Edmondson. Edmondson was from Dayton, but he was recognized in his day as a skilled painter of relatively simple, straightforward still lifes. His fame rose in 1895 when he had a solo exhibition at the Art Institute of Chicago in the second year in which that museum had moved into the building that it currently occupies. And he donated, following that exhibition, one of his still lifes, Purple Plums, that represents the first painting given to the Art Institute of Chicago by a living artist from that city. And that still life of Plums was featured in a 2013, a large and important exhibition that the Art Institute presented called Art and Appetite, American Painting Culture and Cuisine, an exhibition that traveled to the Amon Carter Museum. Well, it's interesting to look at this artist's work, and can I have the next image? In relationship to other American 19th century still life painting, for example, Severan Rosen. We have this still life by a better known still life painter. It's in our permanent collection. And notice the similarity to the way in which the grapes are painted, the glass, the peach. But Rosen is famed for his pre-Civil War abundant still lifes that were almost metaphors for the material prosperity of the United States in the 1850s and 60s compared to the much simpler and more modest still lifes of Ream. But it is of note that—
The Ream goes back to sort of a very late riff on, you know, the kind of still lifes that are the early American still lifes of the Peel family. Really early, but I mean, these are, again, beginning of the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, but yeah, it's an old tradition.
Yeah, products of an enterprising, widely traveled, visually well-informed artist that was exhibited widely and recognized in his day. And we're very happy. These are relatively recent acquisitions, a recent gift to the museum. And
let's stop and talk about that for just 1 minute with people. You know, the museum—
Charlotte, sorry.
Oh, this is fine. No, wait, don't leave that for just 1 minute. It's very important for people to realize museums acquire works of art in many, many ways. We do have acquisition funds that are not huge, but we have some nice, you know, we've got a little bit of money to spend. But collections begin to look like the communities and the people and what they like in a community. That's why, you know, it's why you go to different art museums, because you see different things of what art museums are able to collect and share with the public. This is a wonderful story. These were owned by a gentleman who had always talked about, he'd come to see me, he and a friend of his, a friend that was very close to the museum, come to see me. And, you know, he talked about leaving it to the museum, that he had these two wonderful early still lifes that we didn't have that one, we didn't have any work by Ream, we'd love to have it. And, you know, people, it was wonderful that he wanted to do that. And then he dies very tragically in a car accident, and it's very sudden, and he had not finished his estate plan. But his sister and his family knew that this was where he really wanted the pictures to come to. And they made that possible. So, I mean, the realization that sometimes it's the passion and the generosity of many families over many generations that make an art museum's collection what it is. And I always think it's good to study. These are very recent and they are just beautiful to see on the walls. He had even had them conserved, you know, when he owned them so that they would be in, you know, wonderful shape and condition. So I just needed to say that, David. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. And the reason I was asking for the previous slide is because
his name is there. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Oh, I thought Charlotte was going forward. The previous slide. There's Charles. There's Charles' name.
Yeah, that's fine. So we're going to skip the next one. Go forward.
We're going to not do Clarence Carter. You can learn about Clarence Carter later.
And this will be the final work, the one that we started out talking about that occupies a prominent place in the center of the gallery. That's the only real contemporary work in the gallery too, by the most prominent glass artist from Ohio, Christopher Reese, who grew up on a farm near Columbus. He attended Ohio State in their glass and ceramics program, went out to the University of Wisconsin, and he sculpts his work rather than using the technique of glass blowing. And this is an amazing work of art that's made from a very expensive and incredibly pure, dense glass known as optical glass. And it is a painting that was produced by carving in the shape of a cone, this glass that ended up weighing, I think it weighs over 1,000 pounds. And it is painted. So he, imagine this cone shape that opens up when you look at it now, but imagine putting it upside down, and then he engraved and painted the parts of a sunflower that are biologically accurate, the petals, the center of the flower, so that you see, looking through this glass when it's turned up the way that it is now, this really beautiful recreation in paint and glass of the sunflower. Can I have the next image? And so it rounds out our collection of glass. The Columbus Museum has a very strong glass collection that includes works by the Italian glass master, Lino Tagliapietra. It can get the next.
Just had his birthday show. We just had a show for his birthday.
Indeed. Charlotte, next. There's an image that should pop up on the upper left. And Charlotte, oh, there we go. And that's probably the work by Lino that is most familiar to museum visitors, because they see it whenever they enter the Walter wing of the museum. Endeavor, which are shapes that either resemble boats or birds that are suspended from the ceiling. There's a beautiful blown glass. And then Dale Chihuly, also, who blows rather than carves glass. In Derby Court, we have his Isola di San Giacomo in Peluda. And so this really rounds out our collection with important—
With our guy, with the Ohio guy.
Yes, with an Ohio artist that we do have, and we have had in our collection.
Yeah.
Can I see?
We have a masterwork by all three of them.
Very exciting to have added this to the collection just recently. And you can see that in his earlier works in the 70s, the objects have more conventional forms, a vase, paperweights, etc. But beginning in 1985, he had access to optical glass in a factory in Duryea, Pennsylvania, that was an American branch of a German glass factory, the Schott glass manufacturing based in Mainz, Germany. And so he produced some smaller examples or uses of optical glass, but this sunflower is really his masterpiece. There are two other versions of it. And unfortunately, the glass company burned there was a fire.
Pennsylvania, yeah, the Pennsylvania.
Yes, so he no longer has access to it. So we're very fortunate to have this example of his work using that.
And the last thing, if I were, does anyone ask this question in the Q&A, why is that in there? Why is it in the middle of that gallery? And I know the answer. The answer is that when it was on loan to us for a very long time. It's very difficult to move. It's very heavy. And it actually has a little cart thing that you move it around. It's very hard to move it. And we don't want to move it around while it was on loan because it's scary. And so we leave it there and it's safe, you know, and we don't want to move it, put it somewhere we then needed to move it. But we have acquired it for the collection and it will be moving very shortly. Sometime this fall, it is moving over to the second floor of the Walter Wing, the space between the space between the wall and the glass that looks out over the blue Feely sculpture. So you're looking away from Broad Street. And that's where it's going to be, among other pieces of glass. So you have to come and see it when it moves.
Something to look forward to.
I love this piece. I just think it looks weird in that gallery, as does David. We're both like, okay.
Museum visitors love it too. It's one of the most popular.
Yeah, we will definitely not be taking, no, we only could move it when we had a good, safe place for it, because it is a popular work, but it's a visitor popular piece.
Indeed.
People ask for it. Where is it?
Yeah. Oh, and so we've hit the 3 o'clock mark.
So we got any
something
Q&A?
else to look forward to.
Yeah,
The next Wednesday at 2, remote presentation by Adjunct Curator of Folk Art Michael Hall, talking about his wonderful exhibition, Folk Art Road Trip. So you want to be sure to register and not miss that online experience. And
so let's, while we look at this slide and they can read it, let's do at least 2 or 3 questions.
yes, well, actually, there's only one question.
Oh, only one?
In Q&A. Maybe some people ask questions in chat. Oh, here's another one. Well, the first question is, will the opening for Ragnan be in the museum or will it be virtual?
Ah, that's a good question. We are going to do, thinking that COVID will, assuming that COVID is still with us, which we anticipate, we are going to do a two pre-days. Nannette should know this. Is it Friday? I think it's Thursday, Friday. 2 days before the public opening will be members days, and it'll be all day. We'll have some special programming and some things, but that way, that's what they're doing also at the Barns for Pierce. A number of, we're like having long days where you can be there just as the membership, but with special virtual programming, but not a big party. We're not going to do that. Yeah, it's a little dangerous right now to have the kind of opening we had for, like, you know, the Stonewall show where we're all crammed in there. But it'll be great. And so
we have 2 more questions.
Okay.
So regarding Christopher Reese, since the studio or the glass company that I mentioned had burned down, what is he producing now? I'm not sure.
He's doing different, but I should ask Christopher to see some of the recent work, but he just can't use optical. He can still, you know, he's still working, but the optical glass, these great illusionistic pieces, you just can't do them.
Thanks. And the third question, how many people are actually in Bellows Riverside Park?
I'm not going to answer that because I always get it wrong. This will make you come. Listen, so we're at, so things about coming to the museum, you know, you do need to get your ticket in advance. We even ask you to get tickets on Sunday, even though it's free. It's a free exchange, but it is really wonderfully safe here. So it's with your mask on, we all wear our masks. It's wonderful. We've been eating in the garden, which is one of the loveliest spots in the city of Columbus to eat, or to just have a nice drink or glass. Shaco is open on Thursday nights again, so you can come out and sit in the garden. So think about, when you're ready to come out, think about coming and visiting. It's very, very slow on like Tuesdays and Wednesdays. I mean, if you're really still pretty anxious about coming out, choose Tuesday or Wednesday, because it's very slow. Tuesday, Wednesday, it's very slow during the day. And you will, and very safe. We clean like mad things. We clean constantly, and plenty of social distancing. So when you're ready, we're here. And until you're ready, go online and look at our website. We've got lots of new stuff. Follow us on social media. We got blogs, we got lots going on. So you can have the museum at home with you.
And this presentation is recorded, so you can watch it again or tell your friends about it.
And
And
we'll be posting it, yeah.
indeed, yeah, it'll take a little while for it to be posted. Thanks. And if or when you visit the museum, remember to stop into Gallery 2 and think about all of the art from Ohio that's in there.
And if you're interested in one of those books that David beautifully fit into the, you can just call Pam. She will do it. Take your credit card on the phone. She will ship you the book. We are really good. We're easy. So,
Nannette, one final question. How do I view this recording? And so we mentioned that this is being recorded, but it usually takes 1 or 2 weeks for it to
yeah, it'll eventually be posted on our website. And there's a section on Wednesdays at 2, and it'll be up there as soon as we can kind of get it turned around.
Good. Thanks, Nannette. Thanks so much for.
All right. Thank you all. A lot of you stayed with us right till the end. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.